Thanks, Alexandra, for putting this on and inviting me out here and making it happen. So everyone else, that was great. I'm going to read a story called Facsimiles. It's in the book. If you guys want to buy that stuff, it'll help us get home tomorrow, so that'd be helpful. So, yeah, thanks. I watched her for hours a day. It was her job to be watched. My own work took the back seat to my watching her doing anything. It wasn't just a sexual voyeurism. She could be sitting on the couch eating a bowl of cereal, cooking dinner, or preparing for bed. It didn't matter what she did. I was there, and so were the others. We were all there together, watching and waiting for the next moment, the next surprise. What would she do? The webcam followed her like a well-trained pet. It captured everything. Life as it was being lived there in her apartment, and I could not take my eyes away from the screen. Each month, I diligently paid the renewal fee for my membership to her site, her feed. It was like a trough, and it only cost $22 for unlimited access to a real life, Mathilda's life. We were all willing to pay. Before I disabled the chat feed, it showed over 100 current members, all of them incognizant, shielded behind monikers bestowed on them by the rules of the game, characters and numbers. That's all they were, and they sent a dizzying amount of messages, requests, and provocations. They were dogs in a kennel tearing at each other. Sometimes Mathilda felt compelled to respond, throw them a bone. She'd flash a breast or pull her panties up into the crease of her crotch. Even that wasn't enough. They wanted to see her fucking herself with a dildo or straddling a chair arm completely naked and glistening with baby oil. They'd come to expect a lot from the internet's projection, but she was a real girl, a person with a life. They couldn't understand the privilege of simply being there, being able to peek in on her doing the most mundane thing. They didn't receive the gift they were given. They wanted more, and would leap into the vile and profane. And sometimes Mathilda would masturbate for us, laying herself up in her bed with her fingers crawling below the covers. She allowed us into this sensuous act that was not the least bit pornographic. The rustling of the comforter, the quivering of her shoulders as she came, the moans. If I turned up the volume on my computer speakers, I could hear the shakiness in her breath as she released her inner flood. I'd think about that as I brought myself to climax, there in the chair. It didn't take long, eyes closed, fantasy reel running, audible whispers from Mathilda there with me, really there, delighting in my thrusts and my girth. In the shower afterwards, I'd imagine what it would be like if I actually found her, if we bumped into each other on the street or in a store, just happened upon the other somewhere. What would that be like? Or what if I found out where she lived, set it up so that I met her in a purely coincidental seeming fashion? Hey, wow, you're Mathilda? I'm a member. You come to Whole Foods too? Would that be awkward, or would it seem like fate? Would she even find me attractive? Would she respond to flirtation? Could she date someone like me, with all my insecurities and neuroses? The questions sometimes consumed me, and I found it hard to sleep. I'd max out the speakers and listen to her rhythm, her REM cycle, try to match it. Or I'd sit up and stare at her through the pixelated window, try to put myself next to her, astral project myself into her bed, hover above her like a ghost, disembodied and feeling her warmth through the pure static of my ethereal presence, feeling it in my deepest parts. I'd pass out and wake up to find her sitting at the kitchen table reading The New Yorker, eating a protein bar, laughing with such a childlike innocence at the cartoons it echoed with profundity. At work, I'd have her feed pulled up in a background window and watch during lulls and customer calls. At the peak of the afternoon, she usually did some yoga or went out for a walk. The camera never followed into the outside world. It stayed at her desk where she'd post a note explaining what she was doing, where she was, and when she would be back. She never left us without word. Mathilda was also an artist. Some days I'd pull up the window to find her working on a painting, large abstract work she'd had great success in showing and selling. I visited the gallery websites and could scroll through thumbnails of her work. Some had sold for over $2,000. Her presence on the internet was greatly affecting other aspects of her life, and I realized that although she was there with me and with us, all of us, she was also out there in the world, doing things that made her a much more interesting and mysterious person. What I saw was just a fraction of what made her her. She had depths I could never know or imagine. She was realer than real, both present and yet absent, like the deity of Christ bound to flesh and bone. I'd watch her bring the brush down on the canvas. It seemed to move her more than she moved it. Nothing she did felt rehearsed, an effect you sometimes have watching reality television or documentary films. It made me want to do more, inspired me, I guess. There she was, unafraid of who she was and what she did, confident and sure in every way. How could I not feel the draw? How could I not want to try and reach her level of existence? Wouldn't that bring me closer to her in spirit? Mathilda was the realest human being I've ever known, and yet she remained, for all that I knew of her, an abstraction. We stayed at a distance, despite her filling my consciousness and informing my decisions. At times, with all the other windows closed out and the chat bar minimized, Mathilda would fill the screen, the frame, and it felt like she'd somehow filled me, entered me through some portal, and we were the only two people in existence, melded together through the high-speed connectivity and 1080 HP resolution, suspended in the ether, the void. Mathilda never used her feed as a blog. She wouldn't sit and chat with us. She was simply recording her life. She wasn't there to advertise anything. It was a source of income, sure, but it wasn't a career. The world had forged her this way, and she was simply doing all that she knew how to do. We responded to it. She didn't care for us the way I cared for her. How could she? She didn't know any of us, not the way we knew her, not the way I did. I didn't expect her gaze to meet mine through the distance of our separate screens. That would defy the laws of the universe, and as much as I wish it were possible, some things are forbidden. Things went on just as they had, only I imagined myself devising ways of recording Mathilda's feed, taking the real to reproduction, not for pleasure, but for study. Mathilda deserved that, whether she knew it or not. I thought about setting up a camera in front of my computer and doing it that way, but that would mean that I would have to miss out on the viewing and substitute it with a second-hand sitting. That would have diminished the magic of the moments, of being there with her, and I couldn't have that. That was the whole point of the viewing in the first place, to be there with her as things happened. That's what mattered. The recordings were to be a reference, a guide, not an end, but a means of bringing catharsis. The revelation came to me at an electronics store. I was there buying new toner for my boss's copier and printer. I stumbled upon an add-on software for a webcam that allowed users to invert the recording option using both a newly formatted system application and a special reflective lens. It only cost $100, so I bought it and went back to the office. Told my boss someone had rear-ended me and that I needed to take the rest of the day off to go to urgent care and get checked out. It's my neck, I said. My boss was a sucker. Since technically I wasn't supposed to be off the premises while on the clock and he should have been going to the store to get the supplies himself, he told me to take the rest of the day off and call him when I knew if I need more time. He didn't even tell me to make sure to bring back a note. He just let me go. I left the building smiling and went home with the package. Mathilda was at lunch with her mother. She hated her mother. She'd let us in on several phone conversations, and it was obvious that she and her mother were not the best of friends. Her mother didn't approve of Mathilda's lifestyle choices, and Mathilda liked to end these talks quickly with a lot of screaming at both ends and absolutely no resolution. Sometimes she'd have her cell phone on speaker. She wouldn't even deny us the opportunity to eavesdrop. In fact, she insisted that we did. The install took about an hour. I was unable to access the terminal during this time. The lens was an easy piece to attach to the already existing lens on the webcam. All there was to do after that was wait. I tried to call forth out of the abyss where Mathilda and her mother were eating and what she, Mathilda, was wearing. What did she order? What kind of foods did she eat at restaurants? Were Mathilda and her mother arguing? What about? Was there something I didn't know? There was a moment of panic when the idea that maybe she was pregnant popped into my head. She'd been seeing a guy, Bradley, on and off at the start of the feed, but he, like her mother, didn't approve of the lifestyle and stopped coming around. He was an asshole of the highest caliber. But I thought, what if one of the times Mathilda had left a note like, dealing with Bradley again, ugh, or don't ask, seriously. She'd somehow slept with him, gotten suckered into it, or was drunk and let him have his way with her one last time, out of guilt or something. What would that say about her? What if he'd raped her or something, and she was too afraid to come out and say it? Is that why she'd been wearing all those loose-fitting dresses? Was she showing? Luckily, none of this was the case. She was still herself, perfect. She'd allowed us into even her deepest moments. The first recording I made was of her crying after the lunch with her mother. She'd curled herself up in a blanket on her bed and quietly wept. Later, I opened up the chat bar just to see if maybe she'd hinted at what had happened, what was wrong. What I found was, K-Spot 742, what's wrong, baby? Mathilda at home. Sometimes life just makes me feel like a failure. Ramstar 69, pick or it did not happen. K-Spot 742, you'll be okay. You're a smart, beautiful, talented young girl with a bright future ahead of you. Keep your head up. Smiley face. Tony the Niz, show your tits, show your tits, show your tits. Doombox, sup. What he said, with an arrow pointing up. Mathilda at home, thanks K-Spot, smiley face. Ramstar 69, pussy. Tony the Niz, K-Spot's a faggot. Novius 33, yep, sure is, faggot, faggot, faggot. I thought about typing out a long-winded apology and expressing empathy for the situation, but the bar just kept scrolling and scrolling so fast it would have been pointless. In the weeks that preceded, I began my studies. What I was looking for were elements of Mathilda's life I could bring into my own, easily accessible parts or items I could purchase that would make me feel closer to her. A redwood bedside table from Pier 1 Imports, a bookcase from IKEA, Target bed sheets, a secondhand store writer's desk. I found one that was a near perfect match. A MacBook, art supplies from Utrecht, a body pillow from Bed Bath & Beyond. There were the smaller, more inconspicuous things, the aloe vera hand lotion from Bath & Body Works, Abercrombie & Fitch perfume, not to wear or wind spray around my apartment to create the idea that she had been there, a pair of love pink sweatpants, Dove body wash, 3 Olives cherry vodka, Sprite in 20-ounce bottles, and a Catholic Feast of St. Francis candle. Ironic. I'd started calling off work more and more, elaborating on my original lie. Test, I'd say to my boss. They want to be sure there's no ligament damage, or they found something in my blood, an abnormality. They want me to come back in tomorrow for more blood work and a CT scan. By the end of December, he caught on, and the day he called me into his office to talk, I knew what was coming and went in guns blazing. Not literally, of course, figuratively. I had cancer, I said. What? He couldn't tell if he'd heard me incorrectly or if I'd said what he heard or if I'd even spoken at all. He looked instantly haunted. I went on to explain in brilliant detail my illness. I even brought myself to tears there in his office, and he got out of his chair and hugged me. I couldn't help but laugh and masked it by crying harder, more violently. As I was exiting his office to begin my medical leave, he said, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to call. Thanks, I said, feigning a faint smile. At home, I described the exploit to the fridge. It was now full of organic beverages and Whole Foods bought condiments. I sat at the kitchen table, facing the fridge. Now I've got all the time in the world, I said. That's nice, the fridge said back. It sounded a lot like Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh cartoons I watched as a child. Why do you seem more glum than usual, I asked the fridge. This is a great day to be alive. I don't have any feelings. I am what I am because of what you put into me, it said. Otherwise, I'd just be a cold box. We'll have to work on that, I said. Okay, the fridge said dejectedly. That night, there was a new note from Mathilda. New hope? XOXO. What was that supposed to mean, I wondered. Where was she? It was late. This had always been one of the major hurdles of the exchange. If she was away, then I had no idea where she was or what was happening. What if she was hurt, or worse? What if she was being held at knife point? There'd have been nothing I could do to help with her sometimes cryptic notes. New hope? What the fuck? That night I drove around and looked for her. I wasn't sure where she lived, but I figured if it was in the area, I'd find her. It was possible. Stranger things have happened, you know. It's a small world after all. But I had no luck spotting her. I stopped in at a bar and thought I'd maybe just have a couple drinks while I waited for her to return. I ended up really drunk and enmeshed in a doozy of a conversation with a girl half my age that ended up in my bed asking me, do you have a girlfriend? That's so hot. Is she going to come home? Does she eat pussy? That'd be so hot. I put my hand over her mouth and got rough. She liked it. I hadn't drunk that much in a long time and my cock felt like a string bean. I fell off the girl and passed out. Woke up oblivious to what had happened. The girl was in my kitchen making eggs. Hey, she said, where's your girlfriend? Is she coming home? I'll cook extra. That was a mistake last night, I said, leaning into the counter. No such thing. I don't have a girlfriend, I said, but I am in love with a girl. No such thing. I ate the eggs she cooked and then told her she had to leave. I have a lot of work to do, I told her. She kissed me and left me her number. When she was out in the hall and the door was locked, I cried and fell into a wall. Who was that? The fridge asked. Don't ask, I said, sniffling. I already did, the fridge said. She was nobody. Worst of all, that meant nothing. I don't even know her name. She wasn't a good Mathilda facsimile. You wouldn't know about this, but this is the way those types of arrangements work. It's just two people looking for someone and the other person they know they're not going to find. It's sad, really. I'm just very sad. The fridge said nothing else. Out of shame, I stayed away from the computer. I showered for longer than was usual, scrubbed harder, and left my skin scorched by the loofah. I ate a small meal at lunch. The cabinets had begun to put in their 2 cents, mumbling, "Scumbag, scumbag, scumbag." "I know," I screamed. "I know, please just leave me alone." I wasn't even saying anything, the fridge said. "Not you." "Then who?" Ignoring the fridge, I moved to the living room and turned on the television. Phantom, one of the only programs I could stand to watch anymore, was having a marathon, so I decided to tune in. I more consumed it. The next time I glanced at a clock, it had been hours, literally having fallen off the day. I felt well enough to return to the computer, to gaze upon Mathilda once more, whatever she was doing. I could hear the fridge whispering something in the background. "Shut up!" I screamed across the apartment. There was silence. Mathilda was still absent. In her place was a new note. Maybe? Maybe what? I downloaded the material that had been recorded from the previous night up until that moment, parsed it for clues to what maybe meant, and that's when I noticed it, in the room. 2 shadowy forms moving through the dark. 2. Mathilda had not been alone either. That's what the maybe signified, having an attachment outside of the arrangement she'd made with us, her viewers. Mathilda had been the object of our collective affection, but I had betrayed it, and she followed suit. The forms hovered above the bed. It was impossible for me to watch and not feel sick. Sick for myself and my actions, and sick for what was there, set in stone, drawn out of real life and set to record. There, right there. In the live feed, she was still absent. The note stood there tormenting me. Maybe, the eternal question. I needed my head to shut off, my head or the world, whichever came first. I went back to the living room, stomped there on feet that felt caked in mud, and turned on the television. The marathon was still running, but I couldn't watch. I channel surfed through daytime talk shows, commercials, soap operas, and reality shows. I stopped on an advertisement for a product claiming to be able to remove every follicle of hair from a human's body through laser augmentation. All of the dramatization actors had perfectly sculpted and hairless bodies. All yours for $19.95 was shipping and handling. The erection made itself known. I had to get out. I threw on some clothes and fled. Up the street from my apartment, there was a large box retailer bookstore with connected coffee shop. I'd go there when I felt like I needed to be a part of the world but didn't want to get too close, when things got too heavy at home. The fridge could really get on my nerves. Sometimes I'd try to pick up an orange that would end up weighing as much as a shot put ball. Everything was messing with me. Now there was the Mathilda dilemma. The revealing of my own soul's wretchedness had somehow transferred itself onto her as well, possibly through the radio waves and signals sent from my router. She'd gone to the shadow at the same instant I myself had given myself over to the girl from the bar. These events were locked in a parabolic state. I could see it all at my vantage, and it nearly drove me insane. It took a few punches on my steering wheel, leaving streaks of white dead skin on the rubber, just to be able to walk into the building. The fluorescent light's harsh glow caught me off guard, and I nearly fell into a display for the latest James Patterson bestseller, but caught myself and acclimated to the light, and my rage and self-incrimination all melted with the smooth bass line of an aged jazz song playing through the speakers. I walked contemplatively from section to section, my head filled with musings about the world and myself and all of mankind. Light music and the voices of others and conversations about who knew what. It all mingled and sang with the world, and I felt light, buoyant. I glided on butterfly wings to the counter of the cafe. In front of me was a younger couple. They were happy. I was feeling happy. I watched them there, flirting and being quite indecisive about what to order. They turned it into a game. "What do you want?" the guy asked. "I don't know. What are you getting?" the girl asked back. "I don't know either. Just order," the guy said, laughing. "I don't know what I want, though," the girl said. The guy sighed playfully. "It's not that hard," he said. "Well, then just order for me," the girl said. "What am I?" the guy asked. "You're the man," the girl said. "Damn right," the guy said with a smirk. "Now what do you want?" "I don't know," the girl shrieked. They did finally order. I stood there smiling pleasantly as I waited for the barista to prepare and serve their drinks. I waited for the barista, who was a middle-aged woman in a black top and apron, to come back to the register and take my order. "Hi," she said. "What can I get for you?" I looked over her head at the menu hung on the wall behind her. I tried to look as if I were thinking hard about what I wanted, weighing options, and changing my mind. I said, rubbing my chin. I wanted to look absolutely human, normal, totally supposed to be there doing what I was doing. The barista never got annoyed or sighed or anything. At least she didn't show that she was. I took my time. I said, and paused. Then, I'll have a, I stammered. I felt my face sag and my tongue fall out of my mouth. Out of my stomach arose guttural sounds I made no effort to produce. My whole body tightened up. The barista kept her eyes on me, never looking embarrassed or concerned. I kept my eyes on her, focusing as best as I could. We were looking at each other, or rather, I was looking at her, but she did not see me. Thanks.